Welcome to this ASP video, which is going to be all about double loop circulation. If you don't know what that means, you will do very soon, so don't worry. We're going to start off by me drawing what is going to be an extremely rudimentary version of the heart. So here we go, my brilliant drawing skills as ever, proudly displayed for you on the screen. So here's my heart. You might say, well, James, that looks a bit more like a bucket. And in some senses, you'd be right, but I'm going to keep it really simple how this heart looks today. So there's my heart. I'm going to put in my 4 chambers of the heart. So here's my kind of upper 2 chambers, and they are separated, as are the chambers below. So of course, first of all, let's make sure we know which one's which. As we look at the heart, this side of the heart here is going to be sitting within my chest. So imagine me sort of chest onto you. Horrible thought, probably, but anyway. So this actually would be the actual right side of my heart. So this side over here, let me just draw a little R. This is the right side, and this over here is the left side. So of course the top parts of the heart are called the atria. So let me just put this in. So the top parts of the heart are called the atria. And of course, atria is the plural of atrium. Rather than saying atriums, we say atria. And the bottom 2 parts of the heart are called the ventricles. So we have the atria at the top and the ventricles at the bottom. So of course, this over here would actually be the right atrium, for example, just as this over here would be the left atrium, and so on. So we can label the heart in that way. But the first thing I want you to be aware of is that blood returns to the right atrium. So first of all, let's choose a sort of a bluish colour, and I'm going to have a vessel coming in here to the right atrium. And this vessel we're going to describe as the vena cava, or the vena cava. I never know how to actually pronounce that. The vena cava. And that delivers deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. So the right atrium basically will then fill up with deoxygenated blood. We represent it as blue. It's not literally blue. And then as the right atrium contracts, it will send blood down through this little gap I've drawn in here, which has a valve. But this blood will be pumped down as the right atrium contracts, and it will be pumped down into the right ventricle. I'm hoping that kind of makes sense to you. So we have this blood then pumped down into the right ventricle. Now, just for awareness' sake, this valve here we can call a semilunar valve. Oh, sorry, let me actually rephrase that. That's not actually true what I said. This is what we call an atrioventricular valve, and this specific one's called the tricuspid valve. Not particularly important, but anyway, just so that you're aware. Then, as the right ventricle contracts, of course, the right ventricle is going to sort of contract upwards and inwards. It kind of contracts like this. Okay, this blood is going to be then sent out of a blood vessel which exits the top of the right ventricle. And it kind of comes up out of here. I'll just sort of do a dotted line, and it comes up out of here. And that blue area there, let me try and make it a little bit more solid, is what we call your pulmonary artery. Your pulmonary artery. Let me draw it in there. Pulmonary artery. Now, of course, the fact it's called pulmonary should tell you something. Pulmon means lung. So this is going to go up and deliver deoxygenated blood into the capillary bed of the lung. I'm going to change my colour for lung. And then as that blood is then oxygenated at the lung, it comes back to the heart. It comes back to the heart. And by the way, this is by no means anatomically correct, but just a representation. It comes back to the heart into now the left atrium via the pulmonary vein. So this is the pulmonary vein. Okay, so remember, arteries always carry blood away from the heart. Look, the pulmonary arteries take blood up and away from the heart, and veins always carry blood back to the heart. Pulmonary vein is bringing blood back to the left atrium. Now again, we have the same scenario. The now oxygenated blood oxygen from the lung fills the left ventricle during ventricular diastole. Diastole just means relaxation phase, but let me write that down. Diastole means relaxation phase. And I wonder if you know what the contractile phase is called. Well, the contractile phase is called systole. Okay, systole is the contractile phase, or when the contraction is happening, contractile phase. Okay, so obviously the atrium fill during the relaxation phase. The atria are actually relaxing, kind of sighing and relaxing, and then the blood is able to fill them during that diastolic phase. So as the atria now contract, systole, that blood is then forced down into the left ventricle, and the left ventricle will fill during its diastolic phase. So the diastolic phase of the ventricles, the ventricular diastole, the ventricles will actually fill with blood. And then in a very similar way, let me draw this, that the ventricles will then contract again, upwards and inwards, forcing the blood up and out of the heart. And this time we have a blood vessel coming out of here, and again it crosses in behind, and then I'm going to draw it actually going around the other side of the heart this time. It actually, by the way, I'm drawing this really poorly because the aorta actually branches off to the left. But anyway, it comes around the body, so it comes around to the rest of the body, so it comes to the body. Again, let me make that deoxygenated on the other side. So this blood comes around to the rest of the body. Okay, numerous branches of the body here. And then the deoxygenated blood, once the oxygen has been delivered, is then returned back up to the vena cava, I should say. So you get the idea. We now have effectively a double pump. We have a double loop system. We have a loop that goes to the lung, and we have a loop that goes to the body. By the way, this big red artery is actually what we call the aorta, and it branches into numerous sub-arteries from there. So we now have two loops. We have a loop up to the lung, or a system up to the lung. We're going to refer to that as the pulmonary circuit. The pulmonary circuit is the loop that goes up to the lung and back. And the circuit which goes down to the body, we don't call it the bodily circuit, we call it the systemic circuit, or the systemic loop, the systemic circuit. Okay, so we have this double loop system, this double loop situation. Okay, a couple of other points I want to kind of make before I finish this particular video. Really crude, I apologise for the drawings being so average, but a couple of things. When we look at the heart, we find that the wall of the right ventricle is quite thin. Okay, it's a muscle wall, but it's quite thin, whereas the wall of the left ventricle is really thick. And I wonder if you could tell me why, or I wonder if you would know why that might be the case. Well, the answer is, of course, that to pump blood from the left ventricle round to the whole body rather than just a few centimetres up to the lungs, which is what the right ventricles do, is a much longer, tougher journey. So the left ventricle needs to contract with greater force than the right ventricle. So that's the first thing I would make note of. The other thing is that on the exit points of each of the ventricles, we have valves. So we have these semilunar valves which operate in the aorta and the pulmonary artery, so that when blood pushes up and out, it can't come back in, it can't backflow back into the heart. So these semilunar valves prevent any kind of backflow. Just as the tricuspid on the right side and the bicuspid on the left side of the heart, they also prevent backflow from the ventricles into the atria. So those valves also perform that particular duty. And there's one other point I want to make. So far, I've said that we have arteries that run away from the heart, and that we have veins that come back to the heart. But we have other types of vessels as well. The first one is the arteries. Arteries are the main branches off from the heart. The pulmonary artery and the aorta are classic examples. But arteries then break into less big or smaller arteries, and we call these arterioles. and they are still leading away from the heart. They are still numerous cells thick. They're still quite big, chunky vessels, but we call them arterioles. They're a bit smaller. We then break those arterioles, or they lead into tiny little vessels that lead to every tissue cell of the body, and we call these capillaries, or you can call them capillaries. I don't mind how you pronounce it. Personally, I say capillaries, and these are one cell thick and allow gases to exchange across their membrane. So then we have capillaries. When we're coming back to the heart, yes, we know that down here we've got veins, but we've got something else before that. We have smaller veins which lead into the main veins that are called venules. So just be aware that we have this kind of flow chart of blood vessels for the blood to actually travel through. Okay, that's enough for me for now. Tune into other videos on the cardiac system and the vascular system. Thanks very much.